Hello, everyone. Good morning. And thank you all for joining this special webinar. We're so excited that we have more than 370 people registered for this. As you all know, VA has one of the best electronic health record systems in the world. And Phenomics is evolving as a science in its own right. But the information we have in electronic health record is pretty messy, and it takes a lot of cleaning and curation to get useful and meaningful information from it. While there are many ways of doing that, including common data models across systems, deep phenotyping, using natural language processing, etc., to address and arrive at accurate definition of a specific case, whether it's for health services research, clinical epidemiology, or even clinical operations, depending on what you're using it for. There might be different ways of deriving it. But we've been looking at this from an ORD perspective for a while now, and a lot of these activities are happening at the individual investigator level, and we've been long wanting to create a central resource. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have all of this information documented in a central library where researchers can describe how they derived the phenotype, for what purpose they derived it, and what were the algorithms, how were they developed, etc. And so that was the genesis. This has been a dream for the Office of Research and Development to build such a central resource. And finally, with the support of Rachel Ramoni, our credo, we've finally launched this effort late last year. And we wanted to present it to not only the researchers across the VA system, but also analysts in our clinical operations, our partners, so we can all take advantage of the central resource. So it is my pleasure and privilege to introduce to you Dr. Kelly Cho, who's been the director for the Phenomics core for the Million Veteran Program. For the Million Veteran Program, we've actually required every researcher who curates the phenotype to deposit their phenotypes in this library. And now the effort now is to expand that VA-wide and create a VA Phenomics Library in cooperation with several programs, including Vinci and the Cooperative Studies Program. And so Kelly has also been a part of the CSP program, the Epidemiology Research Center in Boston, as well as an independently funded VA investigator. And so Kelly, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Suma. Really appreciate it. Let me try to navigate. We are, as Suma mentioned, the entire Phenomics Library team is very excited to provide this introduction and to show you what we have built thus far. And with the messaging in mind that this is an ongoing activity, work in progress, where we need everyone within the VA community to contribute and become part of. We're hoping at the end of this hour that we do a good job explaining and showing you the goals and structure of the VA library and how you can best navigate and use the library. And also, we hope you can become a contributor. And if you're already our contributor and partners, we thank you so much for all the effort as we're expanding this VA library to the national VA-wide community. The first half of our webinar, we are going to spend describing some of the background and phenotyping and the current state of where the library is. The second half, we want to devote it to the live demonstration of the library itself. So hopefully you will enjoy. This is a picture of the U.S. Library of Congress, and it's been voted as one of the most beautiful libraries in the world. And when we envisioned the Phenomics Library, we really have this picture where it could be a platform for many of our VA community investigators to come together and really integrate the work and the knowledge base that we have been building all these years. And so that's the picture that I always envision whenever we think about the library and how we're building this library towards the future state. Now, before I dive into many of the exciting parts of the library, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank all the folks, all the teams, leadership, who's been part of this VA Phenomenal Phenomics Library team. As Suma mentioned, mainly the Million Veteran Program under Dr. Suma Realder, with co-PIs Mike Gaziano, Chris O'Donnell, Phil Tsao, and Executive Director Dr. JP Casas. And there's a full MVP consortium acknowledgement that's available within our library, and please check that out for all the amazing work and people that have made the library where it is today. And we have been working very closely in this collaboration with the Cooperative Studies Program under Dr. Grant Huang. And this has been the foundation of how we've learned how to use the data. And we want to make sure to continue that activity. And of course, this library is supported and the infrastructure is supported by Da Vinci, the VA Informatics and Computing Infrastructure under Dr. Scott Duvall. So we thank all of our key collaborators and partners. And we also want to thank all the contributors, including all the MVP project investigators, the CSPR team through the epicenters, and especially the Boston CSP epicenter under Dr. Gaziano, who's been, as I mentioned, the foundation of many of the work that we are doing, and the VAX group, the Veterans Aging Cohort Study under Dr. Amy Justice, who's been one of our major contributors for many of the data elements that we are cataloging. And most recently, we have been able to facilitate the COVID-19 shared data resources as a team. And this has been presented by Dr. Scott Duvall, who's leading this big effort. So I am not going to spend time talking about the COVID shared data resources, but please reach out to Scott Duvall, and he presented a wonderful presentation on April 22nd as well. Just to name the MVP team, as Dr. Suma Realder mentioned, for MVPers, this is a requirement. We ask all the MVP project teams to donate and to deposit their phenotypes as they are conducting their research. And so I want to just really acknowledge all the PIs and the team members. There are 400 such team members who are working towards this goal that's making the majority of the content of the current library. As the MVP library is evolving into the VA library, I also want to acknowledge the MVP Phenomics Library team managed by the MVP Data Core. So thank you so much. And there's a growing list of contributors that are available on our wiki. This is our current VAPheLib program team. Our contact information, you can contact us through the VAPheLib at va.gov, and we are looking forward to working with you and continue to build partnerships, integrating knowledge and collaborating. So back in December of 2019, we had a nice kickoff meeting with Dr. Rachel Ramoni and to expand the current MVP library to the VA-wide community. Our goal here, our mission really is to integrate the metadata of the phenomics work across the VA research and clinical operations community and make it easier for people to reuse and share. More specifically, our objectives include to provide the knowledge-based framework to collect, store, and archive and share phenotype definitions and data mapping and other metadata used in VA projects and publications, and to expedite VA science by enabling phenotype reusability and scalability across the VA projects, and to build a platform to encourage and enhance collaboration and communication across the VA community. And we have our short-term goal by the end of 2021 to collect 1,000 curated phenotypes and associated metadata. And as you can imagine, this work will continue, and we are planning to make this a foundation for many of the research to be happening within the VA ORD and clinical operations groups. Now, I want to put us back to some perspective as far as how we came to where we are today. And when we express and when we share this, the history of where we are, it really resonates with many of us who have been involved in VA research and clinical operations community, conducting research based on this one big VA cohort. And if you think about it, it's one mega cohort that all of us are using for many of the research activities and other operations activities that we conduct within VA. And this experience has really been the foundation of where we are with the library. And locally, our experience goes back to 20 years plus, back in 1997 when Boston CSV Epicenter began. And that gave us a nice platform to conduct research and learn how to use our data to be able to provide the knowledge base that we're building as a team within the VA community through the VA Phenomics Library. And similar experiences have been observed across the VA. And so when MVP launched in 2010, and we were thinking, how do we best share? How do we best communicate across many projects? And MVP really is a big program under which there are many, many projects with many investigators using the same data and with the same goal in mind. So back in May of 2017, this became our mission. And the first Phenomics Library, with the support of Vinci, supporting the Wiki platform, we've launched this first version of the library and it became home for the MVP data documentations and shared community resources. And we really saw the value of how we can utilize a collective knowledge through the wealth of expertise and knowledge on EHR data and phenotyping within the MVP community, and soon began to collaborate with many other big key stakeholders, including CSPR, VAX, and Vinci, and others. And this became our growing library knowledge base. So when back in last year in December, we've got the blessing from Dr. Rachel Ramoni and CSP, Vinci, and MVP to really expand the library to the VA-wide. And through the experience that we had with MVP and continuing experience with MVP, we're really being able to see how we can operationalize and scale to the VA level. And soon after, in recent events, in support of the VA COVID-19 shared data resources, we were able to rapidly respond and open the library VA-wide last month in April. So that really is where things are today in May, and really reshaping the VA Phenomics Library to serve the entire VA research and clinical operations community. And this is going to continue. And we hope to continue this partnership as we go and grow the knowledge base and reshaping how we can utilize the library as a VA community. Now, there's a common denominator, as I mentioned. We are all engaged in using the EHR data. We're collecting the EHR data for a greater good within the VA. And so I want to take a moment to talk about what we mean by phenotyping in this context. What is phenotyping? Why is it important? And I am sure this is all common knowledge, and people agree when I say it's having a good quality data is really one of the key first steps for quality clinical research and translational science. So how do we get to that point where we can utilize the data for quality research? And this is a process. Phenotyping is a process used to identify patients for a specific condition using the elements in the EHR or electronic medical record data. And in broad sense, there are two types of the data types. There's a structured data that come in nice boxed matrix format, and there's unstructured data that include the notes data, imaging data, and other data that need further processing. And the challenge here is how do we do this efficiently? How do we do this well? And how do we do this at scale? Part of our MVP core team is working diligently to think about this question, along with many other VA colleagues, and led by Kat Liao and Tianchi Kai, who's working on the high-throughput phenotyping methods to address these questions. And really, we're asking this because VA is so blessed with so much data. And this is an opportunity and also a challenge at the same time. How do we get to understanding what resources we have available when the size of the data continuously grow? And we like to show this contrast picture of this big data dump. And that continues to grow. And there's a nicely organized library where you can easily find information. And if you think about each of our research groups, locally, regionally, and nationally, we have our expertise within a section of the entire VA community that we know how to organize. We know how to grab the information from the entire big data. And we have organized it well for many years. And we want to be able to integrate all those knowledge bases into one VA Phenomics library. And that is really one of the missions of the Phenomics library. Now, just a simple example to show you a flavor of the Phenomics library and what metadata we are capturing. This is an MI example. MI could be defined in many different ways. And in literature, within the VA literature, we're finding variations of how people have used how people have defined MI. And it could be, as an example, one inpatient ICD code or two outpatient ICD code or other variations. And phenotypes, if you think about phenotypes, they are defined and derived to meet the needs of varying research goals and questions. And they are different for different investigators, different projects, different operations questions. The key is really we need to understand these metadata and provenance of the algorithm, how they were developed, for us to take that information, that existing knowledge base, and apply to my situation, apply to the next situation. And so one of the big goals of the VA Phenomics Library is really capturing this metadata. The institutional memory, institutional knowledge that we all have in our heads and that we all have collected over the many years of working with the VA data, we want to share that information and capture that. And we want to provide the platform for people to be able to do that and communicate. Now, we mentioned that the library went through a transition. We were an MVP library servicing the MVP community, and we have learned so much from that experience. And now we're able to take that experience to the next level to serve the entire VA community. And we're hoping that this will continue to grow and become a utility that everybody could use for everyday research and operations needs. So back in December, when we had the kickoff meeting, this is a picture of our project plan that we had back there. And as you can see in number 4, our plan was to open the library back at the end of year 2. And that changed rapidly with the current pandemic that we're in support of facilitating the VA COVID shared data resources. And we were thrilled to be able to do this at the right time as a rapid response. And so this really kicked us off to expedite everything that we're doing. So what's going on with the VAPheLib as we're expanding quickly? The expansion progress continues. We want to continue to build partnerships and expand the user base, and we want to grow content, and we want to continue to improve and innovate. and to the next phase and to the future state of the library. It all begins with the underlying knowledge base. And so we're still reaching out, we're in the process of reaching out to all the key stakeholders, understanding their needs and understanding how the library can serve those key groups and investigators the best way. And we're also integrating their feedback, and this is part of what we would like to hear from all of you who are listening this webinar, to send us feedback so we can improve the way we're doing building our Phenomics library and really becoming a VA community resource for everyday use. Now, let me spend a couple minutes just to show you the current state of how the library looks like. And let me start by the user base. And this is very interesting, but as expected, you will see that we started our library back in 2017. And this is a process of manually adding people as the needs arise. So if you think about, our primary goal was to service the MVP projects, and MVP community grew over time. So we were adding people as we needed, and adding content as we needed. And before April, we were about 300 plus users. And since we opened the library to VA wide, we are really getting a lot of interest and getting increased utilization. And there are, as of this morning, there's about 800 unique users who have visited and used our library. So this is a very exciting news, and we're so thrilled to be able to provide this platform to do that for the VA community. We're servicing the entire VA community. These are just the top 10 VA sites that have accessed the library more frequently, and we're hoping in no time that all of these dots will become more yellow, and we will also make the library more user-friendly for all to be able to service the entire VA community. The Phenomics data coverage, where things are today. This is data as of last week. We have organized our data by these data classifications. And as you can see, that there are a lot of diseases where we have about 2,000 data or 2,000 phenotypes that's collected. But please keep in mind that many of these collected phenotypes are still in the progress of working algorithms. And what do we mean by that? We have currently 3 stages or 3 status of curation that we're collecting, just so that we can flag the utility and where the process of the validation it stands. So in progress means there's a new phenotype that we have not cataloged, and so a new team or team is working on this new data type. So we want to register that and share that information so people know who's working on that particular phenotype. And there's a lot of the phenotypes are in working definition or working algorithm. These are the algorithms that investigators feel comfortable using, publishing, and good enough for many of the questions that we have, and bring us a lot of useful utility within even if they're not validated. So the next level is the validated phenotypes, where some of these phenotypes went through the validation through the chart reviews and other validation measures, and there's performance metrics that tells you exactly how things were validated, and there are often publications associated with these. And so we are working towards curating and validating more of the phenotypes that are in the working definition in the middle stage, and we're hoping to get to many of these in the next many months to come. And we need the VA community to really help building this knowledge base by joining the library team and working together. At a glance, these are the disease types and disease domains of the current coverage. And as a reminder, these were developed for the needs of MVP projects. So there's a lot of gaps that we do need to fill, and we want to prioritize based on the VA ORD priority to focus on validation and other further curation as well. So now I'm going to switch gears to show you the library from our wiki. And it's going to contain how we can navigate the library, some of the examples of the phenotype metadata, and how one could contribute. So let me go to our library page. So when you go to the library, and thanks to making this available for the entire VA, you can just, within the VA network, you can just go to the link and see this page. And there are 2 ways to go to the main page. You can click on the main page, the VA logo, or there's a main page. And let me try to make this a little bit bigger to emphasize. So on the sidebar, there's about the library, where you can see just general information of how to do things and about the team. And there's also a page where you can do a quick look at the library, and this is downloadable. You could download and print out, disseminate for within your community in general. And then there's a VA team that I just mentioned. And I want to, again, emphasize the fact that the team is really the content contributors, are the contributors and partners, investigators who are contributing to the library knowledge base. And we have dedicated sections for all the contributors, and we are hoping and we are looking forward to growing this list. And there's currently many of the contributors that we're in communication with, and we will continue to update this contributors page. But you could go to each one of those pages and get more information about all of our contributors. Now, there's a FAQ that is growing, and you can come here, and if you don't see the questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time, and we welcome your feedback. Now I'm going to go back to the main page, and I want to show you how we can browse. There's many ways to browse the library. So I'm going to first go to the phenotype catalog, and you can see how the browsing content is divided into the phenotype catalog, which gives you an overview. And when you go there, you can search by status of the phenotype or published phenotypes that are cataloged. And you can also go to the data classifications to browse disease domains or by contributors. So there are many different ways to get to the same page and same information. And when you go to the data classification, it's going to go directly to the data classifications section, same thing for the disease domain. Again, I want to emphasize the fact that the COVID-19 shared data resources are a special contribution. In this section, there's a tremendous amount of information, and it keeps getting updated and new information is populated. And please reach out to Scott and Vinci team for further information and questions about the content of this COVID-19 shared data resources. Now, let me show you how one could search and browse. I'm going to go to under the data classifications and diseases. And there are many that are cataloged. Right now, we have about 2,000 that are cataloged. And as I mentioned, many of these are working definitions. And you will see that they're organized by their phenotype name. And usually they're teams or methods that were developed in the parentheses. And you'll see the map as a multimodal automated phenotype. This is the semi-automated phenotype methodology that MVP Bioinformatics core team developed. And we are putting this out there as a starting point for many of these phenotypes. So I'm going to go down to show you some of the work that are more mature state. So here, if you look at let me just try to highlight. If you look at the stroke, ischemic stroke, there are 4 different variations. And again, this is the flexibility of the library that we want to have. They were developed at different stages, and we want to catalog how people have used and what they have developed. So if I go to the acute ischemic stroke that's developed by Hirschfeld, this is an earlier paper within the VA, and the way it's organized, just back up a little bit, is you have what to expect in the phenotype table. In this case, they were divided up into yes and no, case or no, non-cases, based on some of the algorithms that are described here. Under the algorithm overview, you can see that there's a brief description of how this particular algorithm was developed. And this is based on a paper that's already been published back in 2002. And you can also go get the citation and go directly to the PubMed paper that this algorithm was based on. And this was a good starting point for this is one of our local projects where we've taken that and improved upon by adding some of the using text notes and other available data that wasn't considered in the earlier paper. So we were building on top of the knowledge that's already out there. And that's one of the strengths of the library, this library that we're trying to build. We want to build the knowledge on top of what's already been built and share the knowledge so that the next person who needs to use acute ischemic stroke can come here and check out all different flavors of the stroke variable and how they were used. And you can pick one that fits your need and that fits your question and use as you have them or improve upon how you're doing this. So that's one example. I also wanted to show you another example. And if you go to M and related cardiovascular domain, you can find looking at myocardial infarction, and there are 3 different flavors or variations of the phenotypes. One, here we're showing the one that's been published and developed by Vex's team. And then there are 2 other definitions of the phenotypes. And again, if you click on any one of these definitions, it's organized in a very similar fashion. And you can look at the overview of the phenotype, and there's a validation done and what cohorts used and the person who've developed, and the credit goes to all the authors and contact person. So that's one thing I do want to make sure to communicate to the VA-wide community. That is, each page is contributed to the authors who are sharing their content and sharing their work. And you can easily connect with them through either, if there's a published paper, you can do that, or through reaching out to them directly. And we want to utilize this library as a point of communication to providing people with what work has already been done or ongoing, that you can go and work with them as a collaboration, or you could start a new page if it doesn't exist and begin the collaboration. Now I'm going to go back to the phenotype catalog and show you a couple other examples. You could go to the medications, and here there are, right now we have 52 medications that are cataloged, and I'm checking out one that's done by Da Vinci Services, the chemotherapy medications, and you can see here what project it was developed for and what data elements that went into it, and there's some SQL code that you could adapt, copy and adapt to your needs and your research and data work. And they are laid out slightly differently in terms of the content, depending on what the needs were. And I want to show you another example of the antihypertensive medications. And this is done by our colleagues in Nashville. And here it also provides you with the codes that were used to develop this. And I want to bring your attention to the purpose of this review. So you can see that this was developed for all VA data or VA users, and we worked with a programmer, Otis Wilson, under Adriana Huang's shop in Nashville, and that's his contact info. And this was done to identify antihypertensive medications, including combo medications to prevent double counting by drug classes. So you see exactly what this was built for and what question we're asking. So you can adapt, look at the codes and adapt wherever it makes sense. But that's why it's so critical that we understand how people have built and wrote the codes for their specific needs for us to reuse that code. So now going back to our phenotype catalog, and as I mentioned, you can search and browse through our disease domains and data classifications, but you could also do a search. And what's nice about the Media Wiki is all the text and everything that's on the page is searchable. So, for example, I'm going to search by a code. I know 411 is related to the heart disease, and so this is going to give you all the pages that contain the code 411. So you can see that all the ischemic heart disease and MI, the ones that we've reviewed, and any other related pages, including the 411 code. So if you know an ICD code or the codes that you're using to see how other people are using, this is a good way to search for it. And you can also search for the word in a keyword, and this will give you those pages that include these keywords in our library. And so now let me go back to the phenotype catalog, and just keep in mind again, all of the content this is not a static copy. This is an evolving library in the back end. So our team, the library team, is continuously updating information as they come and as we have them. So please check this out frequently. And if you don't find a page, if you don't find your phenotype, what you can do is you can contribute. So now I'm going to go to how to contribute. If you don't see any information about your disease domain, that's probably because we have that gap and we need you. And we need you to start thinking about how you can contribute your valuable work through this library so we can work together and share. And it's very easy. What you do is we have our initial phenotype entry form that you could fill out. And you don't have to worry about the information that you're putting into this initial form because it's not going to be automatically populated. One of our team members will review and reach out to you to make sure that we collect sufficient information in the way that looks okay, in the way that looks good with the authors before it gets published. So there are 2 ways to go to the phenotype entry form, and here's one, and you can also go down here in the sidebar. So if you go there, it explains you how we're doing this. And again, you can start, and there's some examples, and you can go through the example pages, and you can simply just collect, say, the title of the phenotype. I'm going to say new phenotype, and you can create. And it's going to direct me to that new entry form. And the initial entry information is very simple. We want to know the phenotype name, the data classifications, disease domains, related disease domains, and who you are, and your information, your contact info, and any other additional information or questions you have. And then you can save that page, and then it's going to ping one of our Phenomics library members for them to triage and reach out to you. And And then that starts the ball rolling, and this is how you can begin to contribute to the library. And when the page looks good with the author, we're going to publish and make the links so that it's linked to all of these other pages that we have for the users to search. And as an example, I'm not sure this is my last example. You can also search by groups. I'm going to search a CSPEAR, and it's going to give me all the pages that CSPEAR is cited or in the on the page of the library. So here are all the pages. I'm going to go check out the TBI CSPEAR because I know CSPEAR is creating these fact sheets that are really useful. And again, the goals are different, but understanding the goals of each of these pages is really critical for you to take the knowledge to and apply to what your needs are. So that is important, and that's why we emphasize on the metadata and the annotation. And so this is how the CSPEAR team tackled the TBI, and this is more of a general information for the VA cohort. So they are in a different form, but there's all these details about the components that went into this TBI phenotype. And this one was just using the codes and has not been validated. And the source of phenotypes and the data used are CDW data. And there's also some of these pages have codes that are being shared, which we really appreciate. And we want to get to that level of details that we can all share across. So now that is the end of my live demonstration. And I'm going to go back to my last couple slides to just wrap up before we open up the floor to questions. And so hopefully, now that you have a better understanding of our library, it's open to all VA users, and it's continuously being updated. And we really want this platform to be a place for communication and integration of all the phenomics work, valuable phenomics work that we are doing within the VA research and clinical operations community. We're expanding the content and partnership as part of our expansion plan. We're focusing on the VA priorities and filling those gaps, and reaching out to key stakeholders and super users of the data so we can partner and enhance the knowledge base and enhance the expertise pool within the Phenomics Library. We understand there are other resources, and we want to make sure that this is complementary to all the existing VA resources. And this is why it's important that we collaborate with many of the programs and partner with the key stakeholders within the VA. And we are going to continue to build a library that's portable, shareable, and scalable. So that's what we are planning on doing. And here's what you can do. The next steps for many of us is to go check out the library, become a user. And you can also join our listserv, and you will be receiving some frequent updates and be part of our ongoing discussions. You can simply send us an email to this listserv or go join the VAPheLib listserv by clicking through the links that are available in the library. You can become a contributor and become a partner, and we welcome your partnership. And thank you so much in advance for partnering with us to make this library to increase the knowledge base and really share your expertise with the VA community. We're hoping that this provides many of us a good portal for us to share that valuable experience that all of us are going through. And you can, again, learn more about how to become a contributor through the how to contribute link in our library. And lastly, we want to hear from you. Send us comments, suggestions, questions through VAPheLib@va.gov. And as a reminder, this is just the beginning, and we have a lot of work ahead of us to make this better and improve how we do things. And we also want to continue to innovate for future state. So with that, I want to end the lecture piece here and maybe open up to the questions. And I have our project manager, Ashley Galloway, stand by for questions at this point.
Thank you, Kelly. This is Ashley. So I think we can open the floor for some questions. Some great ones have been coming in already. Kelly, one of the questions was kind of around access. There seems to be several different questions there. So just to clarify, anyone within the VA network can access the library. We shared the link as part of this webinar, but we will certainly send it out after. Kelly, there's also a question about how we will plan to share this with some of the clinical colleagues and collaborators to make sure that this reaches the full VA community. Can you comment a little on that?
Sure. That has always been one of our goals. And as you could see from our mission, is really reaching wide to not only just the research community, but to the clinical operations and clinical side of the house. And one of the ways that we're doing, number one, it's open wide. So anyone within the VA with the VA NT account has access to this. And we want to use the library that's useful for the clinical setting in a way that in addition to collecting the phenotypes, we want to prioritize some of the clinical priorities within the VA and filling those gaps through the knowledge base as well as the utility. If there are clinical utility that one of our phenotypes can provide, we want to focus some of our core resources to address those questions. And we want to hear from the clinical side of the house to understand what those needs are. And that's a part of what we're doing now by connecting with the clinical leads and connecting with the key stakeholders within the VA. So I think we will learn more and we will have more information to share about that front, but that is certainly one of the goals. Thanks so much for that question.
Thank you, Kelly. Also, there are quite a few questions that center around validation. So can you explain more about how these phenotypes are validated and adjudicated and how one would also go about finding those clinically validated phenotypes within the library?
Sure, that is also a very good question. And we struggle with this validation, what's the best way to validate constantly. And if you ask many people who's been doing this, it really depends on how far you need to go. Some of the phenotypes, it's been our experience that some of the straightforward code structure data only phenotypes, algorithms are good enough for certain use. Some of the phenotypes, we do have to dive deeper into validation for many reasons. There's no clear clear classifications within the EHR system, so we do have to go through the charts. And I have to say, it depends on the case by case and phenotypes. And I would start by sharing some of the tools that we use for validation. And one of the strategies now that we are suggesting, we have unsupervised beginning piece of the library for many of our phenotypes that that could be a starting point. And this is one of the strategies. There are many strategies, and I want to recognize all of them. But one of the strategies to shorten the time of the validation is to start from a starting point of unsupervised as a phenotype as an example, and then doing a quick look at the charts, and then assess whether that meets your needs and that meets your threshold of being confident about the phenotype, whether that's within for the sensitivity and specificity. If that fits your need, that is one strategy to go with. But if it doesn't, and many of the phenotypes, again, as I mentioned, it doesn't fit that mold, and so you do have to go further and collaborate and doing more data training and validation process. But I have to say it's a quite involved process, and we're looking into as a group, looking into how we can scale the validation. In an ideal world, it would be great if we validate in a high throughput fashion. And we want to hear from you on this front, from the community. What is the best strategy to scale? And that I think will be an ongoing discussion, one of those topics that we will continue to discuss as we go.
Great, thank you. So a few of the examples that were shown kind of focus around some ICD-based definitions. Can you comment on how if any NLP has been used to develop some of these phenotypes in the TIU notes or other documents? And if so, if there are specific NLP tools that have been used?
Sure, definitely. I mean, one of the challenges with using the EHR data is unlocking the unstructured data. And how do we do that? And we start with the notes data. And many of the VA partners, including Vinci and other NDP and other partners, have developed their ways of looking at the notes data. And Vinci has a tool to be able to do that. We have processed many of these notes for NDP, so we can begin to structure some of the notes data. And this is, again, it's the intensity of the processing. And we're looking into, in a future state, once we process all the notes data, we want to make this available. And pieces of it is already being processed, and we're working closely with Scott, Vinci, and our partners in the Department of Energy to be able to make that notes data available for the VA community. And also, obviously, with the support of the VISL team under Jeff Bates. So in the future, we hope that will become easier. But for the time being, data processing, the notes processing is a pretty intense process. And right now, there's no way to do it at a scale. So we tackle one thing at a time. Again, there's a lot of research that's happening behind the scenes to do this at a scale. But those are some of the activities that are happening, and happy to obviously chat further about some specific questions and how to tackle those things.
Great, thank you, Kelly. There's another question that from a team, if we are seeking a phenotype that has not yet been developed and we are not capable of creating the phenotype ourselves, is there a mechanism to request one to be made or considered?
That's a very good question. This is the question that our core team is always struggling with, because it's a question of resources. And right now, if there are phenotypes that haven't been adjudicated or haven't been cataloged within the library and people have not worked on, well, first, number one, I would definitely go reach out to those people within the VA who have already worked on your phenotype and start collaborating to learn from their experience and perhaps share, perhaps they're willing to share their phenotypes through the library, and you can start from there. That's always our recommendation, of starting where people have left off, so you don't reinvent the wheel. If that is not feasible and you're in a brand new area, we're happy to have initial discussions about the strategy building, and there are different options and different starting points. And we have had many requests and many meetings with investigators to have that introductory initial planning meeting. And so once you have a good idea of what's involved in the phenotyping, then the team can make a decision about which route to go. And it could be, well, we only have 3 months, so what can we do? And if the question is, if your research question is such that you don't have to have a perfect phenotype, let's say you're using the phenotype and that's just going to go into your covariates in your modeling, and it's not your main phenotype, then I would also recommend perhaps we use what's available within the structured data and not worry so much about going to validating those elements. However, I think there are different ways, and it requires planning. I think that's my point. It requires strategy and planning, and we're happy to sit down and chat further and come up with the plans. And we are really keen about what is VA's priority. If this falls under the VA's top priority, we're more than happy to jump in and get more work done in that area, and also to reach out wider to see who's already within that disease expert domain who can join the team. And this, again, has to be a team effort, especially when it comes to phenotyping very complex diseases.
Thank you, Kelly. I know we're getting to the top of the hour here, so we might only have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I just want to mention that we will get a list of all the questions that have been asked during this webinar, and we plan to follow up offline after this call, because I know that there are a lot of questions that remain. One of the other popular questions, Kelly, is what type of data is potentially linked within the library, if any? Specifically, as you mentioned, MVP, whether any of the genomic data is linked to the VA library.
This is a very, very good question. And also, this is a question that we get a lot. So we actually put that out as an FAQ. And I want to just emphasize this one thing. Here's an FAQ. Information regarding million veteran program. Does this mean that I can use MVP data? And I know Suma will be like, no. And that's absolutely right. And I want to emphasize the fact that what's within the library there's no PHI. It's all metadata. And so this is the data about how the actual data have been used and where to find them. And so if you are an MVP investigator, you already know how to find this information, but you could go to the MVP site and you will find all the metadata in terms of what data is available, what survey data looks like, and what core data looks like for MVP. And this is very specific to MVP and where to find all this information. But this library is not linked to the back-end data, and I want to emphasize that fact. And it's our plan sometime in the future, when we have enough phenotypes organized in a fashion that we can all agree and use, it would be great to make that table available, ready to go phenotype data available in the backend, and become part of CDW source, perhaps in the future. And we dream about that, and we're hoping that we can get there sooner than later, at least for the top so many priority phenotypes. But I want to emphasize the fact that the library has no PHI. It's all metadata about the data that you are using. So hopefully that answers that last question, but that's a very, very frequent question that we get asked a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. I know it's now 12:01. I think we can, if you'd like to facilitate a couple of more questions, we're able to.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think we might have time for like one more. There's a really good question here. I think that would apply to a lot of these that have been asked. So is there a mechanism in place for version control and citation to ensure reproducible research? So if we run a algorithm, but it is later updated, then theoretically the results could differ. So is there any thought on having these algorithms be managed via a Git-based interface rather than the wiki, or what is the plan for addressing that?
Sure, I think that's a very good question. I do have to agree with the asker that the version control is so important because things change over time. And so the many variations of the phenotypes that we shared through the library is one of the early attempts to be able to do that, to show you what's been done and then how people are using it as an updated version. And if there's an update to the existing page, we do make sure to make a note of that and then point out what are the updates. And sometimes it doesn't make sense for us to update the same page. And this will be the case where we have diabetes 1 and diabetes 2 and many other versions. This is one attempt of the version control, but in the back end, we are able to track what changes we are making in the system. And so there's a great effort that's going into making sure that we catalog and capture all the changes and edits and version controlling in the back end. So we are prepared to be able to do a better job in version controlling and making those source codes and source text available. And I guess the short answer is yes, it is available. And we're trying to find the best way to make that information available. And one of the both challenges and plan in the future state is creating and scraping all this text and codes from the wiki library and making a backend database. And parts of our innovation team is thinking about how we can do this. And it's in theory, it should be doable because it's all captured. And in that database, you should be able to capture the versions. And there's more planning that we need to do on that front. That's certainly a very important question that we're keeping track of each day as we move forward. But thanks so much for the question.
Thank you, Kelly. It looks like we might have one last question and then we can go ahead and wrap up. So is there anyone working on longitudinal phenotyping or for data such as medications? As new medications are added to the VA formulary, what's the process for updating the data as well as doing longitudinal phenotyping?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Personally, I am super excited to be part of thinking about the longitudinal data. And I know there are pockets of VA research teams who are working on the longitudinal data. Our plan is to be able to embrace that level of complexity within the library. But certainly, we are behind the scenes working to make the longitudinal data available, at least at minimum, starting with medications or vital signs over time, as an example. And so I would ask if the teams, if the VA community has great phenotypes that are more complex than just straightforward prevalent phenotypes, we welcome your suggestion, and we want to think about how we can make those things available as well. But the longitudinal data phenotypes are coming, and I think that those will be the next phase of the phenotypes that we can present and collaborate and work together. So I think there's more to be discussed there, an exciting area, and at a personal level, I'm very excited to be part of some of those initiatives as well. So I'm happy to chat further.
Great. Well, thank you, Kelly. As I mentioned, we will be following up offline to answer some of the questions that still remain. But thank you for all of your great questions, and we look forward to collaborating together.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being part of this team, and thank you so much for everyone who's contributing and joining the webinar today.